722, and then in 606, the first wave of Judah went into Babylonian captivity 100 and some odd years later. And then the second wave went in at 597, and then the thing was finished in 586, 587. The rest of Judah went into captivity. They would come out in 70 years, but Israel would never come out. And then the memory verse was Hosea 4:6, very simple. I didn't ask you, excuse me. I didn't ask you to remember the whole verse or anything, but just remember, my people die or are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. So this is a verse that we should be pretty well acquainted with. Okay, as we start out in chapter 8, we might say that this is going to be MOS, more of the same. And it truly is. Boy, I'm really having some problems here. Got something in my throat, excuse me. But anyway, it is going to be a lot of the same, and it's God trying to get the people to wake up and realize that they're going to be destroyed, they're going to be taken away, and he's just time and time again, he's making all kinds of applications to what's going to happen. And it can be very sad, and if we get far enough tonight, you'll see truly the sadness that it brings God to know that his people have gone this far. So let's start out in verse 1. Set the trumpet to your mouth. He shall come like an eagle against the house of the Lord, because they have transgressed my covenant and rebelled against my law. So when you say sound the trumpet, what does that mean? When you say sound the trumpet. Thank you. Okay, that's right. There's going to be a war. Sound a trumpet. That's an alarm, make an alarm, and truly it was going to be a war that was going to be coming. Assyria would be coming down and totally taking them into captivity and destroying the whole nation of Israel, never to ever exist again. Okay, yeah, that helped. Okay. Assyria would swoop down like an eagle on the nation of Israel, and it was all because of their sins. The nation had just gone totally off track and going into sin. Verse 2, Israel cried to me, my God, we know you, and Israel has rejected the good. The enemy will pursue him. They set up kings, but not by me. They made princes, but I did not acknowledge them. And from their silver and gold they made idols for themselves, that they might be cut off. So again, this is the people are saying, we know you, God, we know you, God, but they have rejected the good. They've really rejected God. And they might say they know God, but their actions didn't follow through. But not one of them knows God. They use their silver and their gold to make idols for themselves, and they will be cut off because of their idols. This is just mentioned time and time again, the idolatry that was in the nation. And a lot of us mentioned this calf that has followed the nation of Israel ever since they left Egypt, really. They had this calf, this idol that they often worshiped. In verse 5, now we read 3 verses there, they will be the silver and gold to make idols for themselves, and they will be destroyed, cut off because they're idols. And what is an idol? Nothing. That's it. Time and time again. Idol is just nothing, and we'll look at that a little more later on, maybe. The calf is rejected, O Samaria. My anger is aroused against them. How long until they attain to innocence? And that is a good question, but it's not answered. How long until they attain to innocence? And really, as far as we know, they never did turn back to God. For from Israel is even this, a workman made it, and it is not God. But the calf of Samaria shall be broken to pieces. An idol is made of human hands and cannot defend itself, let alone the people. And I'm going to read from Isaiah, and several verses, several places it's mentioned, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and it describes an idol. And really, when we get to Isaiah, Isaiah is going to resemble a lot of what Hosea is saying and what Amos is saying. And you say, why? Why would that be? Well, that's right. They're both writing to the same people at the same time. So anyway, in Isaiah 44, I want to just read you this. Those who make an image, all of them are useless, and their precious things shall not profit. They are their own witnesses. They neither see nor know, that they may be ashamed. And who would from a god or mold an image that profits him nothing? Who would do this? The image profits him nothing, and yet this is what they worship. So they seem to have so much trouble with idols, just through and through and through, and they just continue to go back to them. It's kind of like today. I guess we look for something other than God instead of just looking to God. And I don't know if this is where I was going to talk to you about this or not. Yes, you know, what we do is you think, okay, we don't have idols today. Well, yeah, but we do. Yes, we do. May not have been this golden calf, but we do. But instead of just accepting God as a creator, what do? We're constantly looking. We're not satisfied. We're not satisfied to just sit down and say, God created all of this. This is what comes to my mind. We're not satisfied to just say, God created all this, but we got to go out and we got to look for that other thing. Surely there's something out there. We got to find it on the moon or on Mars or somewhere where the origin of life started. And really, in a way, I think that's an idol to us. Instead of just saying, God created this. God made the heavens and the earth. The answer is right here. It's so simple. And, we kind of look at it, why didn't these people understand it? They had to go make themselves calves. Well, we do kind of the same thing. Any comment? Anytime you have a comment, holler out and say it. It'll be fine. I'm sorry, Rex. Oh yeah, that's right. That's very good. That's real good. Yeah, placing all the credit to ourselves, and that's very true. They sow to the wind and reap the whirlwind. The stalk has no bud; it shall never produce a meal. If it should produce, aliens would swallow it up. So they sow to the wind nothingness. That's what sowing to the wind is. If you come to my barn, and if you ask me when we're out there again, I'll show you a hand cedar. And it was my dad's and my grandpa's, I think. And it's a cedar, and it's got a horn on it, kind of like a horn. And it's, as a kid, we used to use it. And what you did is you carried a bag on your shoulder here. Have you seen those? Okay, maybe some of you have seen them. Very few would know what it is. But if you're out there, I'll show it to you. And what you do, you kind of have a rhythm, and it goes in an 8, kind of like this, and you're sowing the seed as you're walking through the field. And that's the way I remember sowing seed. But if you don't put anything in the bag, what good does it do? So if you're sowing the wind, that's what you're sowing. You're sowing the wind. It doesn't do any good. And what do you reap? Well, you go over to Eastern Washington and you see these whirlwinds all over the place. What are they? They're nothing. You sow to the wind, you sow nothing. The whirlwind's nothing. It's just a bigger nothing, I guess. And you go on, and even if it should grow, it says there, now this would be volunteer. And I understand as a farm, growing up on a farm, you understand what volunteer corn used to come up and so on. But even if something should grow voluntarily, strangers will come and devour it. So really, you sow to the wind, and you sow nothing and you reap nothing. Israel is swallowed up. Now they are among the Gentiles, like a vessel in which is no pleasure. This is just describing Israel again, over and over again. He makes these scenarios. God is now looking at Israel as being no different than any other nation, and he has no pleasure in it. Remember, Israel was a precious nation to God. And you're going to see this later on when you see really how God really feels. He's going to reveal something to God later about God later on here. For they have gone up to Assyria like a wild donkey alone by itself. Ephraim has hired lovers. Wow. Isn't that such a description? And it's like a wild donkey, no restraints, just goes where it wants to. Wandered off up into Assyria, even into dangerous territory. Yes, though they have hired among the nations, now I will gather them, and they shall sorrow a little, because of the burden of the king of princes. They have hired for themselves out to other nations, and the leaders of those nations are going to bring sorrow and punishment upon them, again and again and again. And who's going to do that? That's Assyria itself. Assyria is going to come down. And this is what's happening. He's warning them, warning them, warning them. Isaiah is going to warn them. Jeremiah is going to warn them. And Amos warned them as we went through Amos. They're just warning, warning, warning. And they still just don't get it. Because Ephraim has made many altars of sin, and they have become for him altars of sinning. Ephraim has made many altars for sin, and they have become for him altars for sinning. God has given his people one altar where his name should be recorded, and this is in Deuteronomy 12:5. Can't go there, we don't have time. But Israel has made many altars to the calf and the Balaam. So the calf is the Baal, really, and the Balaam came from Ahab and his wife, and it was all idol worship. I have written for him the great things of my law, but they were considered a strange thing. They refused God's law. That's what it's saying there, and even it considered a strange thing. How terrible! And I hope that that's something that we don't see in our life or our nation, a people that's the Bible has become strange to. And it can be a little bit fearful when you look at the way things are. For the sacrifices of my offerings, they sacrifice flesh and eat it, but the Lord does not accept them. Now he will remember their iniquity and punish their sins. They shall return to Egypt. The sacrifices won't be accepted. Why? Because they are in sin. God will not accept the sacrifices of his people because they are all engrossed in so much sin. And returning to Egypt just represents returning to bondage. Is what's going to happen when they're taken into Assyria. Verse 14, for Israel has forgotten his maker and has built temples. Judah also has multiplied fortified cities, but I will send fire upon his cities, and it shall devour his places. Israel has forgotten its maker and built temples for their own self-gratification, not for God. And Judah has followed in Israel's footsteps and forgotten God as well. And they build fortified cities for protection. But who should they be looking to for their protection? God. It's just that simple. And all of those fortified cities that they built for their protection, whether it's Israel or Judah, they're all going to be destroyed eventually, every one of them. Okay, let's go on to chapter 9. Moving right along. Okay. So, judgment for Israel's sins. Verse 1, Do not rejoice, O Israel, with joy like other peoples, for you have played the harlot against your God. You have made love for hire on every threshing floor. It appears kind of like that maybe the immediate threat of Assyria, as I said, it would have been up and down, might have eased up a little bit. And here, what did they do? So what did they do? The threat of Assyria coming down might have eased up, and what did they do? They rejoice and return to their idolatry and their immoral ways. Instead of looking at it and thinking clearly about it and saying we need to turn back to God, even if this is truly what happened and they had a time there where things were looking pretty good, instead of returning back to God, they went back to their harlotry and immoral ways. The threshing floor and the winepress shall not feed them, and the new wine shall fail her. Since they had departed from God and attributed the good things that they were receiving as coming from Balaam, these good blessings would disappear. So Balaam or Baal are all gods, and they really weren't supplying the good things to Israel. And what God is saying is, you attribute it to these idols and not to me, and they're going to disappear. They shall not dwell in the Lord's land, but Ephraim shall return to Egypt and shall eat unclean things in Assyria. Here's what's going to happen. They're going to be taken, again, returned to Egypt. They'll be removed from their land, and this just represents returning to Egypt. This represents returning to bondage. They were in bondage in Egypt when God brought them out, and now they're going to return to bondage, only it's going to be Assyria. And they would not, in Assyria, they would not eat, they would eat unclean bread. This is bread not sanctified by God. And so anyway, their sacrifice and their sanctified by God will be gone. They shall not offer wine offerings to the Lord, nor shall their sacrifice be pleasing to him. It shall be like bread of mourners to them. All who eat it shall be defiled, for their bread shall be for their own life, and it shall not come unto the house of the Lord. In Assyrian captivity, there will be no offerings and sacrifices. It won't happen there. That's pleasing to God. There will be no house of Jehovah. It'll all be gone. God has removed himself from them, and they've been taken into captivity. And the bread that they eat is not going to be spiritual bread. All they're going to eat it for is just for the nourishment of their bodies. And I guess we could make a little comparison with that and the Lord's Supper, because when we eat the bread, it's not for the nourishment of our bodies, really, but it's a spiritual sacrifice. It's a spiritual worship of God. And we're worshiping him and doing what he asks us to do. It's not for the physical body, really. In verse 5, he says, what you do in the appointed day and in the day of the feast of the Lord, or what will you do in the appointed day, in the day of the feast of the Lord? Really, there would be no feast to the Lord in captivity. There would be no appointed day. It's all going to be gone away. They're in captivity now, and God will not be in their presence. For indeed, in verse 6, for indeed they are done because of for indeed they are gone because of destruction. Egypt shall gather them up. Memphis shall bury them. Nettles shall possess their valuables of silver, and thorns shall be in their tents. Egypt represents, Egypt and Memphis both represent bondage or both captivity. And this is what's going to happen. And the nettles and the thorns represent discomforts they would suffer when they're in captivity. Verse 7, In the days of punishment shall come, the days of recompense shall have come. Israel knows. The prophet is a fool. The spiritual man is insane because of the greediness of your iniquity and the great enmity. So there's two views on this. The first one is the eyes of the people of the true prophet. In the eyes of the people, the true prophet was a fool. Remember Amos? They looked to him as a fool. And the spiritual man is insane. And I don't know which it really is. That could be in the eyes of the people. You know, God sent these prophets to them, and what did the people look at them as? Fools. Just get out of here. That's what he told Amos, you know. Get out of here. We don't want to hear you. And they considered him insane, really. The other way of looking at it is a second view is now the punishment is upon them. They realize the false prophets were fools, and the self-appointed spiritual men were insane. So I'm not sure what it is. I think, and certainly at some time when they're in their captivity, they would think, okay, these were false prophets and fools that we worshiped. So anyway, it could be either way. The watchman of Ephraim, verse 8, is with my God. The watchman of Ephraim is with my God. But the prophet is a fowler's snare in all of his ways, enmity in the house of the Lord. Was Ephraim a watchman with God or against God? Now that's a question, and I don't know how your Bibles read there, but the American Standard Version has a keynote or a note in the column beside it there that says, against my God. And to me, this almost makes more sense, but I don't know. The watchman of Ephraim is against my God. And I kind of think maybe that might have been a better translation. That's the American Standard Version. Does anybody have it that way or have a footnote in there that says, okay. Anyway, the false prophets are a snare in the way of the people. They are deeply corrupted, verse 9, as in the days of Gibeah. He will remember their iniquity and punish their sins. The terrible sins in the day of Gibeah, now that's recorded in Judges 19 and 20 that he's referring back to. This had been some 500 years ago. And to think about it, this is something that we remember today, and they remembered clearly in their day. God will remember the sins of Israel as he remembered the sins of Gibeah, and will punish the sins of Israel. If you remember right, this is where the sin was so great it was like the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah, and the tribe of Benjamin defended the city of Gibeah, and God sent the people in, and a lot of people lost their lives over this. And the ultimate result was Benjamin was almost totally, the tribe of Benjamin was almost totally destroyed. 900 men, I think it says, that were left in Benjamin. And so this will be the fate of Israel. Only Israel is going to be totally destroyed. It will never return. But Benjamin did return, though slowly. So in verse 10, he says, I found Israel like grapes in the wilderness. I saw your fathers as the first fruits on the fig tree in its first season. But they went to Baal Peor and separated themselves to that shame. In the early days of Israel, they were beautiful in the sight of God. Just think about that. The days he brought them up and he put them in the land. And as long as they followed him, they were beautiful to God. It's like these grapes in the wilderness, like clusters of ripe grapes and fig trees in the wilderness. But at Baal Peor, they prostituted themselves before the idols. Now this is, they were committed to sin against God by joining with the people of Moab. When they went to Moab, we can go back and look at it, and worshiping Baal Peor. This is in Numbers 25, 1 through 9. And they became an abomination like the thing they loved. And it is said, a person becomes what they worship. And truly that is true. So we won't go back and look at that story, but they did just take up the evilness of the people of Moab there in Numbers 25. And as for Ephraim, this is verse 11, their glory shall fly away like a bird. No birth, no pregnancy, no conception. Now to the Jewish woman, it would be like a mark of divine disfavor to not be able to bear children. It's a big thing today, but it was a big thing for them at that time too. And he's going to talk a lot about this, so listen to this, because the important thing of a nation and how does it keep itself going? It's through the children. It's bearing children, and that's how a nation keeps itself growing. One generation comes, another generation, one generation goes, another generation comes. But listen to what he says here. Though they bring up their children, yea, I will bereave them to the last man. Yes, woe to them when I depart from them. This is what's going to happen when the Lord departs from them. Even if they should bear children, God would bereave them of those until none would remain standing. Sounds bad, but this is because of their evil sin. Just as I saw Ephraim like Tyre planted in the pleasant place, so Ephraim will bring out his children to the murderer. Tyre represented a secure place and a prosperous city, and Ephraim should be like that. But they weren't. And why? Because of their sin. And because of this, their prosperity will disappear. It would bring out the children to be slaughtered by foreign power. And that's what happened. Assyria came in, they slaughtered the children, the women. It's terrible. Give them, O Lord, verse 14. What will I give? Give them, O Lord, what will I give? What will you give? Give them a miscarriage womb and dry breasts. Again, describing what happens when a nation can't reproduce itself. When one generation just disappears and another generation is not coming on because of their wickedness. God asked to give them a miscarriage womb and dry breasts. Wow. All their wickedness is in Gilgal, for there I hated them because of the evil of their deeds. I will drive them from my house. I will love them no more. All of their princes are rebellious. Now Gilgal is located in the Jordan Valley, kind of northeast of Jerusalem, and it was a place of many blessings, but now had been turned into a place of idolatry by them. So, describing just the terribleness that's going to happen. Ephraim is, verse 16, Ephraim is stricken. Their root is dried up. Again, this no more reproduction. They shall bear no fruit. Yes, were they to bear children, I would kill the darlings in their womb. How much worse can it get? It's just continuously describing what's going to happen, and truly it did. I mean, where's Israel? They're gone. My God will cast them away because they did not obey him, and they shall be wanderers among the nations. So we're going to go to verse 10, but I just want you to get a picture here. This almost sounds like God is overbearing what he's telling them. It's too much, Lord. What you're doing is terrible. And we can get this picture of God, but we're going to see that this is not God's feelings at all. I don't know if we're going to get there tonight or not, but I want you to know and understand that when we see God's true feelings, and we understand God's true feelings in the love he had for Israel, it was not that God was this evil God. It was that God was being a just God, and they had rejected God, and God was being just by rejecting them. Chapter 10, Israel empties his vine and brings forth fruit for himself, according to the multitude of the fruit, or verse 10, or chapter 10, verse 10. According to the multitudes of his fruit, he has increased the altars. According to the bounty of his land, they were embellished his sacred pillars. They have embellished his sacred pillars. Israel is described as a luxurious vine. As such, they should have been a glory to God and bringing forth spiritual harvest to Jehovah. And we've just read about all the evilness and the idolatry they're involved in. That's what happened. Instead, they built altars to the Baalim and gave the idols credit for the richness of their fruit. Their heart is divided, verse 2. Now they are held guilty. I will break down their altars. I will ruin their sacred pillars. They have given lip service to Jehovah. Now listen to this. They've given lip service to Jehovah, but their hearts, but in their hearts they worship the Baalim. They worship the idols. A lesson for us today. Our service to God should not be lip service. It shall be action. It should be action and true worship. Anybody have anything to say? Okay. It can't get plainer, really. For now they say, we have no king, but we did not, because we did not fear the Lord. Because we did not fear the Lord. And as for a king, what he would do for us. A little confusing there. To fear Jehovah is to reverence him, and to reverence him is to serve him. Now they do not reverence God and serve him, and their king as their king, so he cannot help them. If they accepted God and said, God, you're our king, then he would be their king, but they didn't. They rejected God, and now he can't help them. They have spoken words, swearing falsely and making a covenant. Thus, judgment springs up like hemlock in the furrows of the field. They had spoken with hypocrisy when making their covenants with Assyria and Egypt. Now judgment and justice will be served like hemlock. And hemlock is a bitter, poisonous herb that would grow on their fields. So anyway, and destroy the crops. In verse 5, the inhabitants of Syria fear because of the calf of Beth Aven, for the people mourn for it, and the priests shriek for it, because its glory has departed from it. So the fear in Samaria is because of the calf. And guess what? What is Beth Aven? It's vanity, and that's what their idol was. It's vanity. It can't help them. It does them no good. It's nothing. It's zero. And they had put their trust in the calf, this idol, and now it's going to be taken away. Is the idol going to help them when Assyria comes down? Not one bit. It's vanity. It's all vanity. That's what idols are. They once had rejoiced over the idol, and now the priests and the people will mourn as it's taken away. They can't even give it up at this time and turn to God. They just keep their mourning over that idol. The idol also shall be carried into Assyria as a present to King Jareb. Ephraim shall receive shame, and Israel shall be ashamed of its own counsel. So the Assyrians are going to take their idol with them. Of course, if they were made of gold, they'd take them. And we talked about earlier this King Jareb. This just means a striver. It's a warrior, a combative person. So anyway, and there has been no record found of such king. It doesn't mean that there wasn't one. It's just that there's been no king that they have identified with this name. But the name means combative or a striver or a warrior. Ephraim and Israel will both be ashamed that they had put their trust and counsel in the idol or the calf. As for Samaria, Her king is cut off like a twig in the water. So that's Samaria. That's Israel. Samaria and Israel, both were Samaria is the capital of Israel, of course. Also the high priest of Avon, the sin of Israel, shall be destroyed. The thorn and the thistle shall grow on their altars. They shall say to the mountains, cover us, and to the hills, fall upon us. Now this Avon is the places of vanity and idolatry. So that's again and again and again. Idolatry is nothing. It's vanity. It's worthless. Those will all be destroyed. As it happens, it will be a terrible thing to the people. They're going to see their idols being destroyed and realize they're nothing. And when this all goes on, it's going to be bad. They're going to call on the mountains to fall on and the hills to cover them. Now, I think Eric spoke a little about this when they were led off into captivity and how terrible it was and the suffering. And the same language is used in Luke 23 and 30 at the destruction of Jerusalem. And we have a very good historical record of the destruction of Jerusalem and the suffering and the terribleness of what happened there. So again, looking at that, which would happen years later, but we can realize how terrible it was when Assyria came down and took the people out of Israel. Also, it's used in Revelation 6 and 16 for the enemies of God's people. And in verse 9, O Israel, you have sinned from the days of Gibeah. There they stood, the battle of Gibeah against the children of iniquity did not overtake them. And now we talked about this again back there in 9:9, and how the tribe of Benjamin was left with 900 people. And they did build the tribe back. In other words, with 900 men. Remember, there was a lot of women and 900 men, so they went and got men from other tribes to repopulate Benjamin, and Benjamin came back and survived. But that's not going to happen with Israel. They're going to be totally cut off. They're going to be destroyed. And as we said many times, there'll only be a very small remnant that will come back. When it is my desire, I will chasten them. The people shall be gathered against them when I bind them for their two transgressions. And when it's my desire, everything is on God's timetable. We know that. It was then and it is now. Now the two thoughts on the transgressions, or the two ideas here, might go back to 1 Samuel 8. And when they rejected God as their king, and they rejected him as their God. And that was two very great transgressions. God wanted to be their king, he wanted to be their God, and they rejected him for both. Israel is a trained heifer that loves to thresh grain, but has harnessed her fair. But I harnessed her fair neck. I will make Ephraim pull a plow. Judah shall plow, and Jacob shall break the clods. Both nations are going to be in bondage. You're going to have this harness around their neck. They're going to be made to be in bondage. So, for yourselves righteousness, and reap mercy. Break up your fallow ground, for it is time to seek the Lord till he comes and rains righteousness on you. With a great judgment coming upon Hosea, the nation, with great judgment coming upon Hosea, he tells the nation, you can change. You can always change. He keeps telling them they can always change, but they don't. Sow righteousness, reap mercy, for it's a time to seek God until he comes and rains righteousness upon you. It's never too late. They never did turn to God. You have plowed wickedness. You have reaped iniquity. You have eaten the fruit of lies because you trusted your own ways. And in the multitude of your mighty men, here's what they've been doing, wickedness and eating lies, because they trusted in the ways and followed man's ways and not God's. Okay, in verse 14 and 15. Therefore, tumult shall arise among your people, and all your fortresses shall be plundered, as Shaman plundered Beth Arbel in the day of battle. The mother dashed in pieces upon her children. This is a vivid description of what happened when Assyria overruns Israel. Again, we've talked about it time and time again, the terribleness. And these two battle places are really unknown. We don't know where they are, but the description is terrible. Mothers and children dashed into pieces by their destroyers. How brutal and how terrible. Thus it shall be done to you, O Bethel, because of your great wickedness, has drawn the king of Israel. At dawn, the king of Israel shall be cut off utterly. This is what's going to happen to them because of their great wickedness. Well, I didn't get as far as I wanted, but next week we will finish. We're going to have 4 chapters to do. They're short, but chapter 11 is one that really shows how God feels about all of this. So come back, because you're going to see the true nature of God. In other words, he's not a God that loves to do this. It tears him apart, and he doesn't want to do it. But he is God, and he's just. So being a just God, he has to do what is necessary to a people that's totally rejected him, that's served idols, that's turned their back on him. And so being the just God he is, you will see his feelings and how terrible he feels about all of this. And I think we can relate that to today as well. Okay, class is dismissed.